business or little business, it doesn't matter. If you're going to be a leader, if you want to have success over the next 5, 10 to 20 years, or even through next month, there is a tried and true formula that over the last 25 years, we have tested over and over and over again in over 40 countries around the world. I want to share the model with you. If you're going to be a business leader, particularly an entrepreneur, there are several things you got to know. And over the course of this series, I'm going to drill down into each one of them, give you really meat and potatoes, hard, fast skills and techniques that you can use to excel in these areas. But first, I want to give you the overview. This is the overview. Anywhere I've ever gone, doesn't matter what language it is, doesn't matter what the economy is, in order to be a successful leader in business, it requires 3 primary skills. And you may have seen me demonstrate these in some other videos, but let's just go through it again, okay? The number one skill in business and in life is your ability to sell. It's your ability to sell. You've heard me say it many times, sales equals income. If you can't sell, there's no income. If there's no income, there's no business. If there's no business, there's no future and there's no team, okay? So sales is critical. And it's not just selling products and services. It's you selling, recruiting people to be on your team. It's you getting people on your team to do what they're supposed to do, selling them. And the most difficult sale of all is what? Is you selling you to you, keeping your confidence level high, keeping your energy high, getting out of bed to execute your mission every day. So sales is your number one skill. And we'll cover plenty of that in the future series. But if sales equals income, massive and passive income and reach and touching a lot of people and helping a lot of people over an extended period of time requires the ability to also build, nurture, and create a great team. A great team. Yes, a great team. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I don't care if your team is 2 people or 22 people or 22,000 people. Many of the rules for building teams is the same, but what happens is a lot of people get trapped in doing things on their own because if you have skill, that's a good thing. But the bad thing is because you have the skill, you'll end up doing most of the things yourself until you burn yourself out. That's why you got to learn how to recruit and how to train and how to get a team to perform. We have a whole section on that later. So number one skill, ability to sell. That's your number one skill. Your number two skill is the ability to build a team. And I will say that if this is your number one skill, this is your number one asset. This is what will bail you out long after you've run out of your brilliant ideas. And the third skill, most overlooked skill, but if you're going to build reach and scale, it's learning how to teach. Learning how to teach people on your team how to sell. Teach people on your team how to sell. Okay? Why is that important? Because otherwise you're going to be doing all the selling and you're going to be very frustrated. Most entrepreneurs are afraid that if they stop selling, they're going to run out of money. They're frustrated with their team because it doesn't sell. And what they hope to have is they hope to have a functioning business that works on its own so they can touch the world with your mission. That's the aspiration. Does that make sense? So again, these are the 3 primary skills we're going to be covering. Now, in addition to that, as a leader, okay, so we put you in here as the leader. That's you, the leader, in there. Is it requires some other skills, some other techniques too. One of which are systems. Got to have systems. What kind of systems? Cash flow management systems, accounting systems, marketing systems, training systems, selling systems. Just about any process that you can think of that you would repeat needs to be documented as a system. Otherwise, you as a small business owner or you as a charismatic leader, you're the system. And everything funnels through you and you're it. And that's not good if you want to take a break or if you want some downtime. Okay, so in fact, systems is one of the keys to being a great leader. And again, if you're not good at it, then you need to have people on your team that are at least good at doing that. Okay, the next component, if you're going to build a business And if you're going to be a great leader, is to demand a high level of accountability. Accountability. Now, particularly if you want to make money, and accountability to numbers. You got to know your numbers. You have to know what your numbers are. You got to know on a daily basis, weekly basis. Again, we're going to cover a lot of that, but I'm giving you the overview. So in your mind, you start doing a little bit of a checklist. Where are we with all these things? Like I said, I've worked with organizations like Singapore Airlines, Morgan Stanley, IBM, L'Oreal brands, all over the world over the last 35 years. I work with hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. And the formula I'm showing you remains the same. There's variations and there's different processes inside that we'll get to later. But if you could just keep these things in mind, if you're not generating income, if your business is struggling, one or two of these things is out of place. Okay? Now, what holds all this together is one thing that I learned in one of my first businesses many years ago when I was in the air freight trucking business. There's one thing that holds all this together. And there's also one thing that sabotages it, okay? The one thing that holds it all together is something that I learned in studying great teams, because I love playing on teams, and I've always been on teams. And that is every great culture, every great government, every great country, religion, sports team, business team, family has something that holds them together, a set of rules, a set of internal rules, not a lot of them, but a set of internal rules that we call, that is commonly called, code of honor. Code of honor. Like I said, a code of honor is a simple set of rules based upon your core values, the core values of you, your organization, or your family, and rules around it. Think of like the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments, 10 rules, 10 very specific rules. Thou shalt not kill, honor thy father and thy mother, don't covet thy neighbor's possessions. All those things created several thousand years ago, still enact today, and incorporates in part of our basic justice system around the world. Okay, so very, very important set of rules. Now, these rules, once it's set in place, are not negotiable. Future videos, I'm going to show you how to do that, how to put it together, and how to enforce those things. So it's one thing to have rules, quite another thing to be able to get other people to play by those rules. But that's what holds it together. Why do I say this? Many times as an entrepreneur, we've had great times and we've had some trying times. And if you're an entrepreneur, you know what I mean. And it was the code of honor, a commitment to that held us all together. Rules like never abandon a teammate in need, be on time, simple rules. If you have a problem with somebody, go direct, don't go behind their backs. These are rules. They say, well, everybody should know that, but everybody doesn't know that, because in the absence of rules, people make up their own based on their own cultures, based on their own values, and where they come from. So it's important. It's not because people are bad. They come together. In the absence of rules, people will make up their own, and it will not allow you to scale. And as a leader, you have to make sure you get agreement on those rules and the code of honor. We're going to show you how to do that. So one of the books that I wrote, here called Team Code of Honor, one of the Rich Dad Advisor books. As you know, I'm a Rich Dad Advisor in the area of sales, team, and also personal development. Now, this particular book is a step-by-step process how to do it. We're going to cover a lot of that in this series, okay? So that's it. That's the formula for being a leader. You got to be able to sell, be able to build a team, and be able to teach that team how to sell, ideally, particularly in 2020 going forward. Critical to get teams to sell, because if not, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, and you're getting frustrated. Systems to hold it in place, high level of accountability. Just put in your accountability, the numbers, and we know that that's what we're talking about. But also an accountability to a set of behaviors that we outline in a code of honor, so that every new person that you recruit into your team already understands this. They understand your mission, they understand the code coming in. Okay, now, good formula, right? Right? There's one problem. So remember, number one skill, number one asset, number one liability. There's one thing that blows this up. I remember, quick story. I remember working with a very large hair care products manufacturer, and they were rolling out this massive multi-million-dollar marketing plan across the United States. And they had all the systems, and they had all the accountability set up, and they had all their teams in place, and they thought it was great. And I was a consultant for them at the time, and they asked me, well, what do you think? And I was just silent. I go, there's one thing that you're leaving out of this whole formula. They go, and what's that? I'm going, what happens when the hairdresser in Topeka, Kansas goes into work one morning and she's had a really bad night? She's had arguments with her husband, her car didn't start, the weather was foul, somebody crossed her the wrong way, and she comes in and she has no intention of following your marketing plan today because her head's in another place. Now what are you going to do? And the whole room went silent. The whole room went silent because that's what the best laid systems and plans fall prey to, this number one liability. So remember, all this is based on code of honor, but what blows a hole in it that a great leader has to understand is this right here. This is the business success formula, not just for 2020. This is business success formula for the last 35 years that I've seen, okay? This is it right here. This is your brain. Now, this is not your brain on drugs. This is not anything like that, but this is a representation of your brain. Now, if I were to ask you how much of your brain is conscious, how much of our brain do I actually use consciously? Most people would say 5 to 10%. Okay, so let's say the rest of it's operating automatically, which I'm going to cover in a minute. Okay, so let's say that's the 10%, that's the conscious part of the brain. So if that's the conscious part of the brain, this part is the subconscious. Now, some people might say unconscious, could be, depends on how you're doing that day, but it's the subconscious. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of memories in there, we have a lot of experiences, old advice from our past. It's all stuck in there. We don't think about it all day long, but every single one of you, if you're watching this, think of it. You've ever been heartbroken at least one time in your life? If you're not nodding your head, you're lying. We all have. Have you ever lost money? Of course you have. Have you ever loaned money to somebody that didn't pay you back? Have you ever been disappointed by somebody promised you something and didn't keep their promise? That never happens. So we roll with those punches. We have upset around it, but we roll with those punches throughout our lives. But then what happens is, as we grow and we go into business, we now encounter more experiences that may look the same or trigger some of those old memories. So if let's say you loaned money to a friend that didn't pay you back and it upset you pretty badly, and I don't know this, but let's say 5 years later, you and I are working together and we have a great relationship. We've been working together for about 9 months, maybe more. And I come up to you and I say, you know what? I'm a little short on cash. If you could loan me about $2,000 or $3,000, I'd be happy to pay it back as soon as I can. Now, what are you thinking right now? All of a sudden, all that goodwill that we've had for the last 9 months, it's gone, because all of a sudden you don't trust me as much. You don't want to hang around with me as much. And it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with something that got triggered out of your subconscious that we call your little voice. You know the little voice I'm talking about? The one that just went, well, little voice, I don't know what. That's the one. I don't know about you, but I got way more than one of them up there. And so one of the things that blows the hole, so our hairstylist, our hairdresser that came in Topeka, Kansas that morning, her little voice was going crazy that day. I mean, she's upset with her husband. She's upset with the traffic. She's upset with her paycheck. You know, she's got all this going on in her head. And then somebody says, we want you to sell these products today. And she's going, you know what? You take your products and do you know what with them. It's not because she's a bad person. It's just that she's not there because she is still preoccupied. Her little voice is running the game. So why do I mention this? Because in this series, we're going to talk about the fact that that in order to be a great leader and a teacher, we're going to talk about that too. That in order to be able to teach and get your team to operate, it's the business side of it, the business skills of how to sell and all of this stuff. But you also got to address the personal development side. You know, back in the early 2000s, you didn't need to do it that much. 2008, you had to start doing this. Now, it's critical. I mean, there are little voices going on all day long for everybody, all over the world as I record this. There's words like fear. There's words like depression. There's words like desperation, anger. Lots of things going on that have been triggered as we go through these crazy volatile times. So as a great leader, if you're going to ignore them, you ignore at your own peril. And I would say that if you look at leaders that are good, they understand it. I'm not saying you got to be a junior psychotherapist, but through this series, I'm going to give you some very specific tools here and there to be able to work with your teams, to address the little voice. If nothing else, to just show them what we're talking about here and get them to be conscious, because for most people, they listen to that little voice in their head and they believe it. It's not you. It's just the old advice and old experiences, you know, and you can laugh, but you can think of the number of times you've seen a grown person acting like a teenager. Maybe you've done it. I've done it too. Why? Because we revert back to old behaviors that worked when we were teenagers that don't work anymore. Mature adults don't act the same way teenagers do, which don't act the same way that infants do. Okay, and in a group environment, team environments, which most of us were not trained in unless you played sports, it's tough. It's tough for people. So it's the business and the personal development side. So through this series, as a leader, we're going to teach you the tools to be able to help people with their little voices, help you with their little voices, because it's always the thing that gets in the way. Why don't people make sales calls? Fear. Well, it's too expensive. They're not going to like me. Or the first time somebody gives them criticism and they don't like the criticism. Why? Because they don't want to be embarrassed. All those things. You'd be happy to know that they're all correctable, but they just don't go away on their own. There's a few people that handle some of those things well, but most people don't. And these days, even less people don't, because there's so much crazy stuff going on. So we're going to give you some tools in this series to be able to get your team, be able to teach your team how to sell better, how you can sell better, systems, accountability, and how to employ the code of honor and provide what we call, what I wrote about in this book, little voice mastery, how to win the war between your ears in 30 seconds or less and have an extraordinary life. Okay, there's over 21 techniques in here of how to do that I learned from my gurus. This is a $500,000 book. That's not $500,000 for you, but that I figured out that's what I spent on personal development, training, coaching, and mentorship for me over my career. At least that. So again, we're going to cover a bunch of this so that you have the tools to teach to your team. My goal out of this whole series is to teach you to be a great leader and a great teacher, because these days, leaders must be teachers. Think about it. Who else is going to teach it? Why? I'm going to say, just quote the great Michael Gerber. Michael Gerber wrote a book called The E-Myth. As an entrepreneur, you would know that book. And in one of his later books, he said that business is a school. And the reason business is a school is because we're getting lessons there every day, right, left, and center. But if business is a school and there's lessons all over the place, who's the teacher? That would be you. That would be you watching this video. So stay tuned. I'm going to give you the tools to be able to teach as you go. I'm not talking about conducting classes and all that stuff, although there'll be some of that if you want to learn it. But really just how to teach and how to get your team to sell and how to generate more income while everybody else is in a panic mode. Okay? So again, thank you for being part of the series. Come back and we're going to start digging in. Be awesome.